Okay, I have 6:05, so we'll go ahead and get started. And I would like to call this meeting to order. And before we get started, I do have some housekeeping that I need to take care of. Okay, I just received that message from them. I want to thank everyone for joining us for the conference meeting. We have a few announcements to make regarding our teleconference meeting, well, virtual meeting. If the video conference is disconnected at any time during the meeting shall be stopped and reconvened once the audio and video connection is restored. If communications are unable to be restored within 15 minutes, items remaining for consideration will be placed on a special meeting agenda for a future date via video conference. The agenda and documents are located on okc.gov. Anyone wishing to speak about an agenda item, please text 405-757-4429. Please provide your name, phone number, the item number, and the reason you wish to comment. Speakers will be allowed 2 minutes to comment. And I do ask that all participants keep their phones on mute until they are recognized to speak, and committee members will be allowed to ask questions or comment anytime during the meeting. So again, I do call this meeting to order. And before we begin, and I hope I'm not out of order for doing this, I do want us to take a moment of reflection as we remember the women and the families from Atlanta. And our thoughts and prayers are with our AAPI community. And this is why we're doing this work, obviously. And also with our families in Boulder, Colorado, that we lost just a couple of days ago. So I would like for us to just take a minute, a pause of reflection to remember all of those and continue to remember those that have battled with COVID-19 as we are still experiencing the pandemic. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all for doing that in unison with me. I, again, want to thank everyone. We have a lot of business, and I do want you to realize, even as we met last month, we said we were going to reconvene in a couple of weeks. Well, it took us a little longer because there was a lot more on our plate than we realized. So that's why we are meeting today. So we do, again, thank you for your patience and your willingness to stay in this conversation with us. So we're almost to the stretch where we need to be. So I will and want to recognize our co-chairs and allow them to give their welcomes and their comments. Dr. Benjamin.
I'll keep it brief. Welcome. Thank you so much. And again, as Councilmember Nice said, we do apologize for these delays, but as you know, this is really important. And so we wanted to make sure that we got things right and that what we presented to you was stuff that we could actually take motion on and have action. So thank you so much. And I'm excited about the discussion tonight and the voting.
Thank you. Mariana Adams.
Yeah, nothing too much more to add there, besides we appreciate each and every one of you all's contributions. I really want to point out and uplift the city and the staff that have been walking hand in hand with us behind the scenes as we created a succinct framework with you all's feedback. So it has taken a little bit longer, but we really feel like we're in a place tonight, this evening, to make a decision. Now, one thing that I do want to add is that we identified 3 frameworks based on the research that we have done and based on the recommendations of the Policy and Legislation Work Group. Those are 3 frameworks. We are not limited to those frameworks. We can do a combination of them or decide to choose one as a path. But if we can't land on anything tonight, that is okay too. We just want to make sure that we have everyone's buy-in to this project as you all reflective of our greater Oklahoma City community. Also keep in mind, however, that our city and our leadership, including the council people that are represented tonight, Hammond, Nice, Stone, and Stone Cipher, are also going to be discussing the fiscal year 2022 budget this summer. And so we want to get at a landing point with this framework so that we can really, if our council decides to reestablish the Human Rights Commission, that we are on the budget, because we know that budgets do indeed reflect the priorities of the, all of us, I think, are in agreement that human rights should and are a priority for the city. So just to keep that in mind, thank you all for joining us this evening.
All right, thank you so much, ladies. Okay, let's get to work. We have, if you received your packet, you received a report, and there's a lot to unpack in that. So we have asked for discussion of our hate crimes report. So I know we have Mr. Steve on with us, and you can take it away.
Okay, sorry, I had to undo all my buttons. So I also have noticed Deputy Chief Clifton is here, and the report that you were provided, I got from police because they are required to track and report that data to, I believe, the OSBI. So the extent of my knowledge with that report is simply that the categories that are required to be tracked are tracked by the department and then reported. Once they're reported, my understanding is the OSBI compiles a broader report and a list, and they report that to the Department of Justice or the FBI, and that's included in their nationwide statistics. So what you see reported is simply the categories that are required to be reported, not any more or any less. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. I don't know if there are specific questions regarding, anything particular about that report, but that's just an overview. And, I'm happy to try, or Chief Clifton we can try to answer any specific questions.
Okay. Are there any questions of our task force? I know members, because I do realize last couple meetings, this was a topic of conversation pertaining to what some of those issues have been pertaining to our police department, how we enforce and the measures we take. I see a couple of hands raised, so I do see, I'll take them in the order I see. I have David Hall and Rabbi Harris.
Hi. So I saw, and I think it's like the 4th page of it, where the hate crimes are defined as, it said, due to the difficulty of ascertaining the offender's subjective motivation, bias is to be reported only if investigation reveals sufficient objective facts to lead a reasonable and prudent person to conclude that the offender's actions were motivated in whole or in part by bias. I was wondering if there were any specific situations, checklist, anything that would allow a person to know, where that would be warranted. So that way we could look at that as at least a minimum best practices if that were to come under our purview.
I might have to let Chief Clifton talk to what the department looks at. I can comment just generally that if you're tracking something as a hate crime, then obviously whatever criminal action occurred has to be a result of that person's protected status. So you have to establish that that was the motivating factor behind, let's just say a battery, for instance. If I batter another person and I'm categorizing it as a hate crime, I would have to know that I am aware, or I assume anyway, that that person is part of a protected category and I'm taking action against them because of that. Sometimes that's hard to prove. Sometimes the circumstances will indicate nothing else could be the case. Maybe they made a comment, a slur or a negative comment as in the course of whatever they were doing that makes it obvious, or at least suggests that they are doing what they're doing because of that person's protected status. But, if without that, you would really have to just draw a conclusion based on circumstantial evidence. And let's just say if this went to a prosecution, if the person denied it, it might be challenging to prove that. So the same issue is in place here. They're not going to categorize it as a hate crime unless they have something specific that leads the investigators to believe that the action or the crime that occurred was because of the actual or perceived protected status of the victim. Does that answer your question, or does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes partial sense more on something tangible for the like making a slur or a comment and then the rest being circumstantial.
Yeah.
What about if there was like a history of, racist, xenophobic, things like that, and the person that they battered, for instance, fell into that class?
I mean, that's certainly compelling evidence, but in criminal or in legal cases, it's a pretty well-known objection that you can't use prior bad acts to prove they acted in a like manner at another time. You have to prove it independently. Although you can certainly look to that as maybe, a factor that could lead you to conclude that, yes, they did act out based on the person's protected status. But while it is relevant, it's not completely dispositive. It's not enough to prove that the other action they took was based on a protected status simply because they've done it before, or they belong to certain groups, that are anti whatever the category is.
Steve, let me jump in real quick, and I might be able to answer your question, Mr.
Yes.
Hall. It is subjective, and I don't know how to ever get past that, but you're keying in on exactly what we do in investigations is, and there's a difference between what we investigate as a hate crime and what the prosecutor will take as prosecuting a hate crime. All those factors that you're talking about play a key role. And the difficulty is you almost have to have them in an interview admit that is why they did it. Otherwise, it's very circumstantial to get to that point. The past history is a big issue. But once again, it's without going through the entire investigative process, we look historically at what you've done in the past, and we kind of hone in those questions to identify aspects that we're looking for, i.e., I know you've done this in the past. Is this a factor? It's extremely difficult. And let me clarify that real quick, to get those cases prosecuted. How we investigate and what we believe is the outlying factor at the forefront, if that makes sense. I hope that clarifies, or if I could say more, let me know.
I think for the most part, yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
I'm
Yeah.
good. I don't need to ask a question.
Okay, I also see Bruce Alexander and Valerie Couch, so I'll take them in that order, please.
Hello. I will direct my question to, I'm sorry, is it Major Clifton?
Clifton, that's okay.
All right. We were, the last time we had this conversation, we spoke to Major Butler, and she spoke kind of as to some of what you're saying as well, that how hard it is to pin down the motive. Whenever she said that even using the use of slurs is not going to be enough evidence to prove that it is a hate crime. I don't understand how that is not enough to at least present it as a hate crime to the prosecutor, and also to be prosecuted as a hate crime. It seems like because one is not happening, then the other won't happen. Because they won't prosecute, then people aren't putting them up as hate crimes, and then it's not being tracked as hate crimes, and it's just feeding the cycle of not actually dealing with the hate crime issue. Can you speak as to how we might be able to make a difference in that situation?
I'd like to say I can't, but I'm some people say I'm overly honest, but because I think people deserve an honest opinion in these cases. You keyed in on it. the way we present a case is our belief, based on facts. And even if we present it as a hate crime, what we believe, the prosecution does not have to take it that way. It's always incumbent, and I've met with several groups lately, and we've been discussing hate crimes, and the best resource in the police department to engage in those conversations and those trainings. And there was a lot of back and forth. And initially it was investigations, because that's where the rubber really meets the road, where you're pulling that information out of the suspect. But when I step back, it's really the patrol officers, because if they're not keying in on those phrases and documenting everything that occurred there, the investigator will never know what was said. And I'm particularly talking about racial slurs, LGBT, anything that would lead you in a direction if that had anything to do with the intent of why. And usually we're talking about intimidation, vandalism, or some kind of assault. So we've got to take that information. There's a big push right now, and I've actually got that information or that training set up for our patrol officers of the importance on everything that comes out of an individual's mouth at the scene. Even at the time you see it's hearsay, if it was stated or overheard, it gives that investigator that key piece of information to move forward with an investigation to try and get there. As far as how to get the DA or the prosecution's office to take those cases, I'm at a complete loss, other than very good conversation, very in-depth conversation, and communicating the extent of what you want to get across, instead of just, I say this all the time, and I think everybody in this group will understand it, but we all too often listen to respond because we have a preconceived answer we want to give, instead of listening to understand exactly what's being said. And sometimes it just takes an investigator slowing down. And I don't want to say in defense of the investigators, but oftentimes we will present a case more than one time because we know that there's a little more to it. And we're looking for almost homework from the DA's office. And I just took over investigations, and that's one of the things I'm keying in on again is when you get to the DA's office, if they decline a case, ask why. And if there's something missing, let's go back and work on that. Don't take it at face value that the case is concluded, I guess is my best answer.
That seems like a step in the right direction, definitely. From what I heard last time, that is a pretty vast improvement on my understanding of it. So definitely getting the patrol officers to report it is a huge issue, and seems like we need to maybe have a conversation with the prosecutors, if possible, just to understand what their thinking is behind that. Because to me, it's a huge issue, and it seems like something that the burden of proof shouldn't be on the victim.
And I don't want to overburden the prosecution. Understand that they come from being in the courtroom and with those juries, and oftentimes it's their willingness to take a lesser crime like an assault and battery over a hate crime, just so they get that conviction. I think it's just as important to them as it is all of us. I don't want to lose a good case based on an element that I couldn't prove. I'll take what I can get if we can get them into the system and get something done, or in some kind of accommodation for that victim.
How unrealistic is it to believe that you could make a hate crime as an additional offense that may or may not be they may or may not be convicted of it?
I've been questioning myself all day. We're talking about state and federal charges.
Mhm.
And on those charges, you can always include a lesser included crime, i.e. first degree murder, second degree murder, manslaughter. Well, if the elements aren't met, but at a city side, Steve might be able to answer this, I'm not sure, but at a city side where our fines are maxed out and it would be an equal charge. I don't know if you can do that, but I'm not an attorney, so I can't answer that question. But to your original in a state court, yes, you can always include those as lesser included crimes. That way a jury or a judge has the option of either or.
Okay. That's all the questions I have, unless Steve can speak to the point.
Well,
I'm sorry. I want us to be cognizant. I think that this is a really important topic, especially when we're talking about human rights. and reestablishing the Human Rights Commission, and Bruce and David and everyone else that has chimed in. To your point, this is an area that if the commission is reestablished, they will be able to dive in deeper and work with this various city departments on where are some of the gaps, et cetera, and so forth. For this conversation, I'm hoping that, Valerie, I want to get it over to you because you had a question, but that we're really honing in on if there are we seeing trends of more hate crimes happening in our community? If so, who is really investigating that, pulling resources? And do we feel like the Human Rights Commission, if reestablished, would be a vehicle to do that work? So I just want to kind of tighten it in just a little bit, so that we can get to, the meat of us actually figuring out what the best pathway is for this Human Rights Commission in Oklahoma City. So Steve, I know you're about to say something, and then Nikki, you said Valerie was going to go next.
I can wait if you want me to wait for Ms. Couch's question.
Valerie, do you have a question?
Yes, I was going to ask Steve and others who might have an opinion. This is along Moriana's point. How could a Human Rights Commission use this annual report? Help us envision how we might interface with this work as a commission.
Well, here's the bottom line. When we're talking about hate crimes, the key word is crime, which means you are looking to hold somebody accountable criminally because they committed an offense against another person because of their protected status. Because it's a criminal penalty, it means there's no way to get around. We must prove in court that that was the animus behind them taking whatever criminal action they did against the person. You can create as many categories as you'd like. But at the end of the day, there is where the rubber meets the road, is can you prove, and Chief Clifton talked to it, the investigators have to drag that out of their suspects to determine if it's a hate crime, because at the end of the day, if you can't prove that one element, that's in a hate crime, you're going to lose the case. Now, like he said, in the state, you may be able to charge them or convict them of a lesser included, but in the city, you're going to choose, is it a hate crime or is it a simple assault and battery? If you decide to pursue it as a hate crime and you fail to prove the one of the significant elements, you've lost the case and that person walks away. So one thing I can suggest, if you want to look at something, is making the elements of these crimes easier to prove. For example, I pulled up the city ordinance that says this is for assault and battery, and it's under section 25-55 of our city code. And it says no person shall maliciously and with the specific intent to intimidate or harass another person because of that person's race, color, religion, creed, assault or batter that person. So one, you have to prove the assault or battery occurred, which isn't too hard to do. But then you have to prove they did it maliciously, which, what does that mean? Then you have to prove they did it with the specific intent to intimidate or harass because of their protected status. Perhaps there is some working with that language that can make that hurdle, that burden of proof, easier to surmount. Right now, I would find those extremely difficult, absent a flat out admission on the a recorded confession that, yep, I did that because they were, one of these protected classes. Otherwise, you're just going to have a simple battery or an assault. So anyway, there's one thing I think might be something to do, is make the elements necessary for a hate crime easier to prove. Choose language that's easier to prove.
And you're saying the commission could be a voice in encouraging a legislative change. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you've got your state violations and then you have your city violations. You have two bodies you'd have to deal with, the city council, and then of course the legislature. And, you know, I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but that's certainly something. If I were prosecuting one of these, how challenging is that to prove? You know, if it's a word like maliciously, that's very specific, and there's probably jury instructions for that term, which you probably remember. But, you know, those words are very important. And if they're so high of a hurdle to get over, then, you know, absent an absolute confession, it's going to be difficult to prove it was a hate crime. So that might be one thing to look at is, can we make it a hate crime without having these other factors involved? And I apologize. I wish I had an example off the top of my head, but I don't. But I'm just realizing that might be one place to begin to look.
So I think we're all trying to envision what we are actually proposing that the commission be and do. And I was just trying to find a way to wrap this report into that effort.
I honestly don't know, you know, beyond some sort of lobbying efforts, what the commission could do, because, you know, I mean, these are state statutes and city ordinances that, you know, the governing bodies need to, or the legislative bodies need to decide what they want to prevent and how. And, you know, that's just language, wording of the statute or the wording of the ordinance. I mean, everybody agrees what we're trying to prevent, and everybody understands what most of the protected categories are. But at the end of the day, you know, how do I hold somebody accountable for their actions based on a protected category?
Let me interject real quick, because I think most of what Steve said is very important. That's why we rely on him. It is that ability to prove. And just a minute ago, we were talking about the trends. Is it worse or is it better? To me, that it's kind of a non-factor. And I'll say that in respect with years ago when I came on, we changed the domestic violence laws. And it was a big issue. I don't think it's gotten any better. It continues on. However, there's a higher charge for domestic violence. And to me, it's the fact that it happens, period. We need to have an avenue to identify it beyond, and Steve referenced it as simple assault. I think everyone knows it's not taken lightly. It's an assault and battery. It's an attack on an individual. But defining, like Steve said, at a legislative level of some factor that is easier to prove. And I hate saying it like that, but the burden of proof is everything when you end up in court. We can opine, we can assume, but getting that through courts, it's always going to be the difficult part.
Did that answer your question, Ms. Valerie?
Well, it gave me food for thought. I'm really just trying to think, what are we going to be doing as a commission, and how might we interface with this need, for instance, for change in legislation? And are we going to be able to be a body of that nature to study things and then propose things to the legislature? I think that would be a really worthwhile thing to do. And I just, as we're thinking about what we're doing, I thought I'd explore that a bit.
And I didn't mean to limit the focus to just the criminal cases. I mean, there's discrimination outside of the criminal context too. So I was only talking just because that was the topic at the moment about the criminal side, but I didn't mean to narrow it to talking just about that.
Yeah.
And for the sake of the conversation, David, if you don't mind, I'm gonna let Ms. Deborah Jenkins ask her question, and then we're gonna move on because we really need to unpack all of these different options that we have and discuss it so we won't get caught. But keep in mind, again, this is why we are here. One, to look at how we reestablish the Human Rights Commission, because I know that's what we all would like to do. So how do we reestablish that? And then once it is established, how do we re-engage and look at all of these other things that we are discussing? So let's keep that in mind as we continue to work through this. Ms. Jenkins?
Thank you, Councilwoman Nice. I think Steve kind of touched on it. My question was really, absent a flat out admission, is there ever any consideration given to an offender's membership in a group that espouses hatred for a certain group, or possession of literature that's associated with bias?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say those things are not taken into account, but to hang your hat on one of those is probably a poor decision. And those are things probably you're going to argue to a jury. That, think back when you're the police officer deciding whether or not this is a hate crime, that may not factor into that decision. Those may be things I may try to present to a jury in order to sway them to convince them that it actually was a hate crime. But as far as initial filing, I don't know that it would, like I said, it's not going to be ignored, but I don't know how much weight, the chief can talk about how much weight that's given at the investigation stage, and it would be included in the packet that goes to the DA or the prosecutor. And, if they felt that the totality of the circumstances gave him enough to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt, then sure, that would just be another arrow in his quiver, really.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much for everyone that weighed in, asking questions, and also to our city staff. Thank you, Mr. Clifton and Mr. Chris. Thank you so much. We appreciate you for being with us. And clearly, this is a great topic for us to have, especially with what's happening right now in our country. And clearly, we do not want that to happen in our city, but what are the things that could take place if it does? So at least we know some of those things. So we'll continue to unpack that. And if you have questions, we can make sure that the gentlemen are available to answer those for your convenience as well. So thank you again. All right, let's move on to our next item because we have a little ways to go. So I'll let the ladies. We're going to do items for discussion and vote. And this is item 4. Does the task force want to recommend to council the reestablishment of a human rights commission? If yes, then the framework. A, prior OKC HRC ordinance, which is an Oklahoma City Human Rights Commission ordinance. B, a plan based on the task force survey responses. Or C, a plan based on policy and legislation working groups. So Dr. Benjamin and Mariana have been working diligently. And also we want to also thank our city staff and Mr. David Hall for his input in the group, the advocacy and policy working group, for all that they have done in this effort as well.
I don't have too much to say other than I think we need to just first vote on the first thing is, does this body want to reestablish the Human Rights Commission? And if the answer is no, then we're done here, honestly. I hope that's not the answer. I hope that we've been working hard on this and the answer is yes. And then I think we need to move to what will hopefully be not a short discussion, but just my ask for us is, given the time and the number of people, is if someone has already made your comment, we don't have, I think let that stand. But I do think if people have specific questions, this is the time. I know I got a few emails. And so one thing to keep in mind is that there is still parts of what was recommended by the policy group, and also some of the things you even voted on in the survey that are just still under review. And so they're not here today. And so again, this is just to give a framework. I thought Mariana explained it pretty well. This is just to sort of set up some of the parameters. And we also do want to respect that if we reestablish the Human Rights Commission, the first set of commissioners will sort of also need to kind of have a conversation, and they themselves will decide a little bit about what exactly they're going to do. So this isn't everything, but this is just providing a framework so that we can move forward with that next step. Again, once some of that language comes out of the legal review and we have a better sense of what our parameters are, then we can vote on those pieces. I don't think I missed anything, did I?
No, you didn't. Jane, could you tell us what's the best way or approach for us to vote?
Okay, so Sharita has set up polling. And we're it's an A, B, or C multiple choice. I can share my screen. I've got the the framework.
Oh, wait, but for the first vote of just yes or no, do we want to is A, yes, and B is no then? Sorry.
I don't know. Sharita?
Oh, I did not
didn't.
make that up. I just did the chart that you sent me. If you give me
Okay.
2 minutes, I can make that question real
Okay,
quick.
thank you. And I want to say, I did forward this to one of our I forwarded my invite to the task force member, so I'm not in this meeting twice. That's another task force
That's
member.
Quentin Hughes.
I don't want people thinking I'm trying to put my hand on the scale and get extra votes. And I'm not committing voter fraud in the Human Rights Task Force. Please.
We will
Yeah.
will recall you, Dr. B. We will
Please
recall
don't.
you.
I don't want to be on the news.
Or maybe we can do it by just everybody, if you are on your screen, we can raise our hands if you're in favor of the task force. If you can do that with your hands raised from the feature. I see quite a few. They are going up, and I see all of these hands. Okay. Waving back at me. Beautiful.
So if we're able to count them and note the votes, that's great. But otherwise we'll want to wait for Sharita's screen
Okay.
so we can record it.
Okay. I have 16. Oh, actually I have 17, 18. Oh, I guess I need to raise my own hand, right? That would be helpful. It would be very helpful. There we go. 18. I see 18, 19 hands raised.
Hold on, I have someone who needs to be promoted to panelist. They used the wrong link. Hold on.
Okay.
They might want to vote. Okay. And who did I need to rename?
The second,
The
Dr.
second.
Benjamin.
Dr. Benjamin. Okay.
That's
And who-
Quentin Hughes.
Okay.
It's Dr. Hughes. Is Dr. Hughes in the house?
Okay, here we go.
Speak now, forever hold your peace if he's on here.
I'm here. I was cool with Andrea Benjamin #2.
I bet you were. I
There's
bet.
only one me, Q. There's only one.
Is there a way to maybe screenshot this so we can have it?
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask. If Sharita, you're able to tell whose hands are raised, you have a list of all of those.
What I can do is go back and look at the recording later and document who voted what, but we definitely have a majority vote to say yes. So that I
Okay.
think that's enough to go forward.
Yes, you're right. That is. Thank you.
So, yeah.
All right, everyone, I'm gonna lower your hands, but pat yourselves on the back. We have decided to move forward to reestablish a Human Rights Commission. So thank you for that. All right, Ms. Jane.
Okay, so here comes the framework. Can you see that over here? That was the first item. So then the second thing is to talk about the number, how many members would an OKC HRC include?
Jane, I'm gonna launch the poll so that they can vote, but it needs to just be appointed members voting. We have a lot of guests on the call. They do not need to vote in this poll, just appointed task force members.
Would
I
it
don't
be
do that.
helpful just asking the members for us to summarize each plan, or do we want to just go straight to vote?
Oh,
Did people have time to read over each of the plans with the packet that went out?
Let's do a brief overview, if you will, just so we can.
you guys tell me when to launch the poll. Sorry for interrupting.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Miss Rita, if you're on, would you mind discussing the previous commission?
Sure.
Column A? Okay.
Sure, I will. And quickly, the commission in 1988 was disbanded by ordinance. It had 9 members. It met at least every other month. It had subcommittees, and those subcommittees were empowered to address human rights issues. The commission established as many committees as it deemed necessary to review concerns and adopt policies as they related to individual racial, religious, or minority group interests. Committee members were appointed by the commission, with at least one commission member serving as chairperson of such committee. The committees met on regular dates as established by the committee. There were forums. Human rights commissioners were empowered to participate in forums designed to educate the public regarding the human rights concerns of racial and other minorities. There were term limits. Members of the 1988 Human Rights Commission were appointed for a term of office of 2 years or until a successor was appointed and confirmed, except that initially those members appointed from odd-numbered wards or at large served a term of 2 years, and those appointed from even-number wards served a term of 1 year. Thereafter, all terms are for a period of 2 years. Each member of the commission was subject to removal from office by order of the mayor upon approval of the city council. 1/2 or more of commissioners currently serving constituted a quorum with the 1988 commission. Action taken at any meeting will require a majority vote. The term majority vote for that commission meant at least 5 votes or a majority vote of those present at the meeting, whichever was larger. Action taken at any meeting of the 1988 commission required a majority vote. Again, that meant at least 5 votes or a majority vote of those present at the meeting, whichever was larger. And Human Rights Commission members were selected to include, and at that time we used the word handicapped, older Americans, women, and at least a majority from racial and religious minorities and other persons who have demonstrated an interest in human rights. Did you want me to? Okay.
Are there any questions on that, the previous commission and that framework before we move on to Plan B? Dr. Benjamin, did you want me to cover that one? Oh.
Valerie, did you have a question?
I did. If it could be done briefly, could Rita tell us why the commission was disbanded?
I'll give you the very quick version. This was in the mid-90s, and there was concern about gay men specifically having protections, and a number of men dressed in dresses and wigs and makeup came to council meeting, and one of the council members suggested that just to fix it all, there should be a disbanding of the commission. And so it was in 1996.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you.
Do you want me to do this one?
I have a quick question, right quick. So in other words, you're saying, Rita, that when they disbanded, was there a vote of the commission to disband, or just that someone, the chair or whomever, decided that they were going to disband? How did that go?
It wasn't the commission at all. The commission is enacted by ordinance, and it is also disbanded by ordinance. So the commission itself did not vote to do any of that. It was all the city council.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I'll do my best to summarize the survey results. So you all took a survey. So one, yes, and even by our vote, that by answering the survey, you said you wanted a commission. How many members would it include? 9 was the mean response. It was the most popular response in the survey. How often will the HRC meet? Under the survey, at least monthly. So could be more, but it's at a minimum once a month. Will there be subcommittees? If so, what kind? Discrimination investigations and review committee, advocacy, and an education committee. Will there be forums? We didn't ask you about that specifically, but by inference, given that people, before said that there would be education committee and advocacy, that would include forums. Will there be term limits? If so, how long will the term be? 2 to 3 years, and they would be staggered, but no term limit, just 2 to 3 years, but it would be staggered. How many members will need to be present? We didn't ask you about this, so that's one thing. If we decide that Plan B is the one that you wanted, we would need to revisit that part. How many questions? Yeah. How should HRC members be selected? In the survey, we asked you that, and we got a response that representation by wards, representation of specialties or expertise, that is people who have a legal background, and representation of minority groups and special populations. I don't know if people have questions about Plan B. All right, and David, would you mind just briefly summarizing Plan C?
Yes. So for Plan C, we had no less than 15 members, but not to exceed 21, and you'll see why we have that later on. How often will they meet? At least monthly. For our committees, what we had was we didn't want to limit it. And so we wanted to have as many committees as the HRC deemed necessary, to further everything that we want to do. And then all of the quote unquote big HRC members shall serve on at least one committee. And then they will also, they will be chosen by the chair. From those who are on those committees, they will then serve as the chairperson of each of the committees if they're coming from the commission, and then we have the meetings, and they shall also have regular dates that the committee decides. And then, I skipped over this one. And then the committee members, the majority of them must consist of minority groups. That is a requirement in there. Let's see. Yes, so we have that for the forums, the commission members must participate in forums to educate the public regarding human rights concerns of racial and other minorities. And we have a requirement that they must participate in at least one. And then, and with that, we have some language to also make sure that there can be, human rights awareness campaigns, stuff like that, without, again, limiting us. So we want to make sure that was strong. With the term limits, we have, let's see, the terms are 2 and 3 years. It depends on the ward to start, just because we want to make sure that they were staggered as well. So it works out to be staggered. It's just that depending on odd or even ward, you start with 2 years or 3 years. And then after that, everyone does it for 3 years. For how many members must be present to vote. Our quorum is 75% of the currently serving members. And then all action requires a quorum, reason being, this is important enough to have, and you were important enough to be appointed, so it should be important enough to you to be there. Already said that. And then, let's see, and then the amount to vote, or for, I should say, for a majority vote, it'll just be 50% plus one of those in attendance. So you must have quorum first, and then after that, 50% plus one. So for how the HRC members should be selected, this is where you'll see that, minimum of 15 and then maximum of 21. So, and this is after the first time around of appointments, I will say, because we have to have people appointed first before we can have committees to do this. But after that happens, you have to actually serve on a committee in order to be appointed to the HRC. Now, remember that those committee members must be, it is a requirement that they make up minorities. Okay. With that, the HRC members, the big HRC, must be appointed by the mayor, with one member appointed from each ward first. And then again, from that group, the majority of those folks must be selected from racial and religious minorities who have demonstrated an interest in human rights. And then our addition that we have here, you'll see, is that we want to ensure that there's equity. And so what we have here is persons who identify with populations which have historically been underrepresented in governing bodies or are not currently represented on the commission will then have preference to fill any vacancies as at-large members. So we'll first have wards fill up, however that many is, and then to get to that 15, we'll give preference to those who either haven't historically been represented or currently aren't. And then we have as a sort of addendum that that there must be at least one person that practices law or is appropriately educated in law on the HRC itself.
Thank you, David. Questions for David about the Plan C?
I have a question. David, in the section where it mentions, you mentioned the racial and religious minorities who have demonstrated an interest in human rights. In that next sentence, are you speaking to people that come from the LGBTQ community or the physically or mentally disabled community as the next body of historically been underrepresented in governing bodies? Would you mind explaining that a little bit?
Yes, that is I should say from our group, that is our intent, is to try to include that. We know that there could potentially be some pushback, but if it's not explicitly stated, we still have the power, but there's no official thing that's there that we have, that we have to do that. But that is definitely the intent of us, is to make sure that we are having everyone who should be there, be there.
So do you think that that will be a questionable, if we decided on section C, that'll be a questionable consideration from, I guess, the citizen community or anybody else that may show up for comments regarding it being so vague?
No, it's one of those things that I don't know if it actually has its own phrase, but the phrase that I like to give it is vague specificity. And basically what that means is it's specific enough that we can do it, but it's broad enough that you can't say we are. So as far as that goes, since we have for instance, partially we have intent in there, but then also we have persons who identify with populations who have historically been underrepresented. We know it is a fact that, for instance, LGBTQ people are underrepresented in government. It's just a fact. And then, for instance, with our group, for instance, say we don't have someone who, is deaf or blind or, some sort of other disability, then we can actually say in there, well, we don't, and we're supposed to have preference for someone who is not currently serving on our commission. And if that's the case, then we need to, and as we have there, it must have preference. So, it's there. So, based on the work that I've done, that should be enough. So I'm comfortable saying that. Obviously I think, for an official thing that would need to come from, city attorneys, but we didn't hear that from them in our discussion that we had. So it sounds like it shouldn't be an issue.
Is there an age, no age stipulations, right?
Not that we put in there, and I don't think the other one had one. I think they might have said that they wanted to make sure that, I think the word that they used was elderly, was in the original ordinance, but, so.
I'm going the other way with that. I'm talking about, you have to be at least 18, or is there some, can a young person be on the board, on the commission?
There's nothing about that in there. So, technically, obviously I don't think it would happen, but technically, they could be, 6 months old and, and make that happen. So, I wouldn't worry.
Ms. Rita,
Commissioners-
thank you, Ms. Rita. Can you clarify some things on that?
Sure. A minor would need permission from a parent to participate, but other than that, whatever age you decided to seek or to recommend for seating would be fine.
Okay.
I see that we have questions from Councilmember Stone and Dr. Wilson. I want to make sure we hear from them. Councilmember Stone, I saw you first, then Dr. Wilson.
Thank you. Just real quickly, first, I want to thank David for all his work on this. He, being in these meetings, he's carried a lot of water, that's for sure. But something kind of came to mind, and I don't really know what the answer is on it, and I'm hoping someone on the panel will. When we talk about 9 versus 15 to 21, I've started wondering a little bit about the logistics of where do we have 21 people meet at? Where do you have the 21 people meet at along with the other participants that would be there? I just started worrying about it logistically a little bit and realizing that it probably puts more of a burden on city staff versus 9.
I'm going to defer to someone on the city staff that might be able to chime in. Yeah, I think it's a fair question. Logistics are obviously, and that's part of the reason why we're trying to get ahead of the budget, to have a staff member to help the commission. So I don't know if Miss Rita or Miss Jane, I don't know the answer.
The Arts Commission has had 15 members before, and they met in City Council the last few years, but prior to that, they met at the Will Rogers Center on 36 between Portland and I-44. So there are other places to meet, is what I'm saying, besides City Council chambers.
Okay, thank you.
Most of the boards and commissions are 9. I mean, that's pretty common because then it can be recorded. I mean, we're sort of geared toward the 9 since that's the size of City Council.
Okay, Dr. Wilson, did you still have a question? Then I see you, Bruce. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Wilson.
Just quickly. Ditto, I agree. Thank you, David, for all of your hard work and your research. My question is, since we're looking at all of the, we're basically looking at the past, the present, and the future, how all of the suggestions, or are they suggestions from the policy and from the policy working group? So those things, David, that you just presented, are they flexible, or are these what y'all want to present as, hey, this is the vote?
So what we've presented, and I will just go back to Dr. Benjamin's point about this does not include all of what we've proposed by any means. Like this is, and my policy and legislation folks know this, this is like maybe 1/10 of what's in there. Like it was pages long. So yeah, there's still a lot. But as far as what we were able to pull, so that way we can actually, get the bare bones of an actual ordinance and have something official to start with. This is what we have that's proposed. And this is just what we voted on as a group. That's why, for instance, we didn't, I think the one main difference that we have is that 9 versus the 15 to 21. So, that's where, we kind of went a little bit more independent of what we thought was best. And then, gave it to the group, knowing that the group would then decide if they wanted to have a different number or not. So, that is where we as a body decide that. So that is more of a, whenever we determine, or I should say what we determine by the vote, as far as what is or is not changed.
Okay, so for clarification, to make sure I understand, you're saying that, okay, so hypothetically, we as a committee decide, hey, we like Plan C, but with revisions. Is that what, well, with some revisions, is that on the table? Or could that be on the table?
So yes, oh, go ahead.
That's definitely on the table. And I think based on what Sharita and Ms. Sharita and Ms. Jane were just talking about is sort of the way we're gonna vote is
Okay.
Each element.
numbers. And you
That's
say A, B, C. So if you like the 15 to 21, please vote C. If you like 9, vote A or B, right? Then how often should they meet? If you, at least every other month, you vote A. If you want it to at least every month, right? So we're just gonna go down. So in that sense, it will be like what you said, Dr. Wilson, that we're kind of piecemealing it, I think. So you don't have to commit to one full plan. I think we're gonna just go by thing, and then that way, it'll be that way, if that makes sense.
Okay. Like I said, I was just asking, trying to get clarity.
Little
'cause
column A, little column B.
For sure, yeah.
Well,
So,
exactly,
yeah.
and that's what I was wondering. Because what if it is one where I'm not even looking directly at it, but what if it is one where you're like, well, I don't have a definitive A, B, or C. I would like some of B and C together. I would like A. You know what I mean? So, okay, I was just trying to be clear. Thank y'all.
Bruce, did you still have a question? Okay, I can't see everybody, so I don't know. All right, are there any other questions? Otherwise, I think Ms. Sharita and Ms.
Bruce, you were muted.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Just to reply to Councilman Stone real quick. For me, I was one of the main proponents of the 15 to 21. It's more about the vision of as many perspectives as we can have as possible, and then figuring out the logistics once we have that in place to make it happen. Because I mean, I feel like it's more important to set the bar to get as much diversity as possible in this group, and then to figure out how to make it happen, because I know that we can. I know that we have the facilities to do it, and I'm sure that we will find a way.
All right, awesome. Any other?
Dr. B, I have my hand raised too. I'll lower it, but I wanted to, if you don't mind, speak to that as well. In our group, the reason that we went this route is I believe Councilman Stone was a part of the conversation, because we ended up having a vote about how many in our own group, about how many we would have. But again, futuristically, we're thinking forward, because we want this commission, and we want our city. We even want the current boards and commissions to be more inclusive than they are of our community members, and more diverse. While we see a movement in these areas, there's a way for us to move forward and be forward thinking with this particular group in its reestablishment. So I want you all to consider that, because those were the things. And I hope I'm speaking okay for the group that we were a part of in the legislation and policy working group. These are the things that we would like to see as far as our city is concerned: more inclusiveness, more diversity, and more equity. So in our opinion, this encompasses all of those things if we're able to have more members at the table that represent groups that we know have been underrepresented and not at the table. Thank you.
Any other questions before I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Jane and let these polls pop up and see where we land.
All right.
I hope it's not a third. So.
All right, Ms. Sharita. So I think we answered the first. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Can I ask one more question before we move on? Or is it too late?
Yes.
Up to the
Okay,
chair.
I just have one question to ask to Rita before we start to vote and everything. When the 88 Commission was around, are there any documents or anything that speaks to how effective they were prior to disbanding?
I don't know if there would be documents about it, but I do know that several people appeared to be helped by that commission. And previously, when I said about how it was disbanded, what I meant was all of this is at the will of the council to begin a commission and to end one. So in terms of its effectiveness, I think people who came to the commission may have believed that it actually was. several things were resolved.
Okay, thank you so much.
I'm having difficulty voting. I'm not quite sure if anyone else is.
Yeah, I am too. I was gonna say that the choices are not represented, just the letters.
So Sharita, I'm not a voting member, but I was able to darken a circle. It popped up and I clicked on the circle and it darkened. So is that what anybody else is trying?
I'm showing that one person has voted so far. The letters.
That's me.
The shared screen is so you'll know what the A, B, and C are, because the answers were so long, I had no way to put them in this poll, so.
Well, the problem.
Jane's
is-
email.
Right,
Yeah,
if
the
you
problem-
can, if you can just be a little patient with us, because I have to pull it up on my other, on my other screen to read them side by side, so I know what I'm voting on, but it is working, just slowly.
What were you saying, Nikki?
I was going to say the problem for me is I'm seeing host and panelists cannot vote, so it's not allowing me to be.
Oh, let me change. I'm sorry. Let me change
Yeah.
this real quick off of a co-host.
And that vote you have now on one, that's mine. So please disregard it. I shouldn't have a vote.
Yes, when I run the report after the meeting, to see
Okay.
who voted how, I can remove yours.
Okay, thank you.
Try it now, Nikki.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I didn't realize that was a thing.
So y'all let me know if you want me to scroll down. Or I guess, we're still on. I'm sorry, I'm not used to polling.
Yes, we're still on your shared screen too, Jane.
Okay.
But if you want to scroll down, I mean, yeah, so people are looking at their own document, but all the questions are in there. So we're also just moving through them.
Okay.
I'm sorry to be a problem here, but on my, I did it first and it said, and there were A, B, and C choices. Is that what everybody's seeing?
Yeah, so for each question, so for instance, question 6, will there be term limits? If so, how long will they be? You can vote for A, which is the ordinance language from 1988. Which is yes.
Okay, and
right?
so.
And then B is 2 to 3 years staggered, and then C is 2 and 3 years, depending on ward initially, then all appointments shall be for 3 years.
So Dr. Benjamin, what I have in front of me is the first question is, will there be an Oklahoma City Human Rights Commission?
Yeah, I think that's on there, but we already voted yes on that straight up.
I know. So how do I go to the next question? I guess.
Oh, can you scroll down? It's not scrolling.
There's a gray bar on the right side. If you click it and drag it down, it'll move the document.
A gray bar on the right side.
On the right side of the voting block, right below the green, on the right side, there's a gray bar that's vertical. If you click it and move it, then it will slide down to all 9 of the questions.
And I have to touch even on my computer, I have to sort of move my fingers like I'm scrolling in it. So maybe if you touch where the poll is and try to scroll up and move, then maybe the bar will show up. Is that working?
No. I'm sorry. I just have the first question, which we've already answered, and I can't get to the next. Should I just vote?
Yeah, just
verbally?
Or just pick C, or
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Are you on an iPad? Maybe it's different. Maybe it's going to click through.
Yeah,
I am on an iPad. Okay, I've got to number 2 now. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. For others on iPads, if you answer the first question, it should go to the second question.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah. You'll have to click next if you're on your iPad.
Thank you.
And y'all let me know if you need me to stop on any of the specific questions. I just wanted to have it there if people didn't have the other piece in front of them, so.
Did you get mine, Jane?
I don't have,
Are we voting by names or how are we voting?
I can't see any of that. Oh, I guess we'll see it after the fact. I don't know. Sharita's
Is
our
it-
polling expert.
Is it on your screen?
I submitted mine.
Oh, okay, then you're fine.
Okay.
Whew. There's a little bit of joy that comes with hitting that submit button. We've been doing this for a couple of more than a few months now, and I appreciate everybody's hard work on this. Do we need a couple of more minutes? I see folks looking up at their screen.
Yeah, what I was
Mariana,
gonna suggest, oh, sorry, I was gonna suggest if you have finished, will you raise your hand so we can make sure we at least have everybody? Or go ahead, Rita.
I'm showing 19 have voted, and I think we have 20 appointed people on the call. So it looks like maybe waiting on one more person to finish. And if I'm off, my apologies. And I also believe the poll results will show when I end the poll.
All right, I think if you don't mind, ladies, let's go ahead and move forward with that.
You want me to go ahead and end the poll?
I think a few people are still voting.
Are they?
I think. Maybe not. Does it say how many people have submitted?
I still show 19.
Okay.
Is there anyone who's willing to speak up if they need more time so we can know for sure?
Does that count Dr. Benjamin?
Well, I can't see who yet. All I can see is a number. It says 19 have voted.
Yeah. And I'm looking, counting hands, so I see a few that have not been raised, so I'm going to assume they did.
Sharita, did you discount my poll?
I can't touch it until I end it.
Oh,
so,
okay.
yeah, sorry. While it's
I didn't know
active.
I didn't know if you were waiting on it was the reason that.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay, thank you.
All right. If you have not voted, speak now or finish, speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay. Okay, Miss Sharita.
All right.
I haven't voted.
Who said that?
This is Andrea Benjamin, number 2.
Do I need to turn the poll back on? I have an option to relaunch it if I need to. Or are you kidding?
Yeah, no, I'm not kidding. I was unable to, I see the letter options, but I don't see content. Okay, I see. So we got to kind of go side by side.
Correct.
Okay. I'm being told that if I relaunch the poll, it'll clear my existing poll results.
Okay, never mind.
Maybe Q, Sharita, would you be able to just email, maybe did you make this in a document somewhere? You could just email to Q and he can email you back like 1A, 2B, 3C.
The only document I have is the packet, so he can shoot me.
Okay.
He can shoot me an email that says 1A to according to what you guys have in your packet. I think that's probably the fastest way.
Yes, I'll do that.
Okay, thank you, Q. I just sent you the packet.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. All right. Can you put me back on as the co-host, please?
Absolutely.
So I can lower these hands.
Hold on a second. I got so many screens open.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the poll results are they showing on your screens?
They are. Yes.
Yes, we can see them.
Okay. Let's briefly go over what we have accomplished today. Congratulations, everyone. We did this. It looks pretty good, I must say. So obviously we said yes to, will there be Oklahoma City Human Rights Commission? The question was, how many members will in OKC HRC include? We had 79% said no less than 15 members, not to exceed 21. How often will the OKC HRC meet? We have 89% basically saying how long will they meet? I have to compare it to my sheet too here.
Once a month.
Once a month. Thank you. You're so kind. Thank you. And then I don't need to read this. Y'all can go through this unless I have to.
I don't think, I mean, to me right now, it looks like there's an overwhelming consensus that the language crafted by the policy commission is what people want. There's not even any that are 50-50 or even close. So I don't want to misspeak Miss Rita or Miss Jane this is saying that basically this body has decided to move forward with the language crafted by the policy and legislation group.
I think that's appropriate to say. We just need a verbalized record of what the results are. And you
Oh.
did that. You did that just now.
Oh, okay.
You did it. So we're good.
All right. So this is great. I'm excited. Thank you all.
And special shout out to the Policy and Legislation Committee for our hours and hours and hours. And then thank you to everyone who gave us all the information so we could go and do that. So just want to say thank you.
Yes, and I want to reference again, we were on deciding this, we were on that call for over 3 hours, shaping this work to present to you all. So I thank you for trusting our work and putting your work with our work for us to collectively do this work as it is. So are there any members to be heard? Or is there anything else from Dr. Benjamin or Mariana? I was ready to move on.
Oh, no, I think that's fine. I think as we mentioned, this is just a framework. And so we do have some next steps. And so again, we're waiting for the legal review of the rest of the policy and legislation group's language. And I think then the next steps would be for us to come together, probably in a very similar fashion as we did tonight, think about what's being presented, maybe going back to some of the survey results and comparing it to 1988. And then we will be able to do the same thing to move forward with some of the things. Again, the actual protected classes language needs to still be determined once it's out of legal review, and then the duties and sort of what exactly the task force is, the Human Rights Commission would actually be doing. I don't know if I forgot anything.
Both the protected classes and then the domains of rights will be our next conversation. So when we talk about domains of rights, employment, housing, accessibility, contracting, et cetera, and so forth. And then when we talk about the protected classes, race, nationality, ethnicity, religion, et cetera. So some of those things are still under legal review, as Dr. Benjamin just alluded to. We'll get together here in the near future to discuss those things.
All right. Are there any members to be heard? Okay. Do we have any? Oh, yes, sir. Mr. Alexander.
There was some stuff last time that we kind of left on the table. We were kind of hotly in debate over several issues, and we were cut short on time. So I was wondering if we wanted to pick up any of those issues while we had a little time left on this call to try to just figure some of the other stuff out.
Are you willing to wait till our next meeting? Because we'll be having all of those conversations with this one in our next meeting.
I'm willing to wait. I just wanted to bring it to the table and make sure that we didn't want to. I'm always ready to have a good discussion, but don't always have to.
I know you are, Captain. I know you are.
And we just scheduled till 7:30. We were trying to keep it, not 2 hours, just till 7:30.
So we have 2 minutes left. So our next meeting, we will start with and pick up where you are wanting to pick up. So we'll do that and make sure we have that on the agenda for us to pick up right there and move forward with the conversation from there. Are there any members from the public to be heard?
Nope.
Public comment?
Yep, I just checked. No, there are not.
Okay. With that being said, we have 7:29 on the clock. My calzone's waiting for me. So I am going to adjourn this meeting and looking forward. You all, thank you so much. I can't say that enough. Thank you. And please be mindful. You were crafted to be a part of this group in this conversation for a reason. And that was to get us to this point. So thank you so much for being with us. And thank you for all that you have done and all that you will continue to do in the effort of human rights in our city for a One OKC, as our mayor so deems that we should be. And these are steps for us to clearly get in that direction. So thank you so much. And again, be looking out for our next meeting, and we'll have that information and send it out to you. So if you have any other questions, make sure you send us an email so we can make sure we get the information or your questions answered. So with that, 7:30 on the dot, and we are adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.